actually, this brings up something that I definitely wanted to get in this discussion, which is that we can be talking about what the rules say in the laws and the ethics and morality of it and legal ideas and history. But what's particularly interesting to me, and it's something that I brought up when I was last November when I was in D.C. On Capitol Hill, was, I said, to some degree, where you all stand on these issues is becoming kind of doesn't matter, because what's happening is it's with YouTube has unleashed just this whole oceanic change. It's a sea change, really, where people are simply doing this. There is just so much stuff going on. It is so easy to reproduce, chop up, rearrange, and disseminate stuff that it's just happening. So, to what degree do you want to deal with just having an entire population of criminals? And how much is public policy basically completely fallen behind our public behavior? And you as politicians, and that's kind of what I was saying to them, is maybe you need to start not just listening to the lobbyists from the RIAA and the MPAA who come into your office, but there's another perspective, which is that there's in fact, 99% of the people out there who do creative work aren't making tons of money. Do we need to have laws that just protect, in the case of the RIAA, they bring Sheryl Crow to one of their hearings, and basically Sheryl Crow is saying, I'm here representing all musicians, and this is what's bad about downloading. And I said, but Sheryl Crow is actually representing herself and about a very small number of very wealthy rock stars. Most people who make music aren't making a living off of it, and there's all kinds of incredibly new, creative, inventive, and innovative ways that they're figuring out to just self-distribute their work, completely bypass this entire industry that's grown up around it, and figure out new ways, to make money in some way or another, whether it's through maybe downloads that are pay what you want, or they're performing, or I'm sure you've all been following all this to some degree. So it was interesting to me to realize that I had this sort of really weird stepping through the looking glass kind of experience of realizing I was sitting in the offices of these people who don't hear from people like me at all. They usually are hearing from very well-funded lobbyists all the time. That's who gets through the door. That's the only point of view they ever hear. And I just encouraged them. I said, as these issues keep evolving, because this is never going to go away. These discussions and debates and legal arguments about ownership and profit and money and the copyright law and intellectual property are going to just keep going on and on and on and on. And I just would encourage you that when you do hear from these lobbyists, I said, you got to remember that there's an enormous user and creative population out there that's just kind of doing what they're doing. And do you really just want to keep spending all this time and money and legislation on trying to just absolutely legalize them out of existence? Because it's never going to work. You're doomed to fail.
Is there a question in the back? Because that's where people have to stand.
Does an entertainer have to write the block commercial use of the footage 10 years after publication? If there's a film out with an entertainer in it
Right.
for 10 years, and then the entertainer says, wait a minute, I want some of that on too.
Yeah, this is now getting into the area, outside of copyright, and now into the area of right publicity law. Right. And Larry, I'll let you go ahead.
Well, so your question is, if there's an image of somebody that appears it first appears 10 years later.
No, it's been out for 10 years.
It's been circulated for 10
And
years.
it's flattering.
This is purely hypothetical, right?
It can't be. That's why it has to be real. She's asking if it's real.
So I can give you some general answers, but obviously not tailored to whatever the specifics are of a particular case. But the thing to keep in mind is there are statutes of limitations for all legal rights. And those statutes of limitations vary depending on exactly which statute you're talking about and which state it's in, if it's a state right. So just for example, the statute of limitations on copyright infringement is 3 years. The right of publicity, which is the right to control use of your image, is actually a state right. So there are 50 different statutes of limitations. But in most states, those statutes of limitations tend to be certainly less than 6 years, maybe even less than 3 years. So, and then there are also some doctrines in what's called equity, which is the branch of law that deals with issuing injunctions, which are orders to stop showing a film or taking down a piece of art. And those rules, generally described as estoppel rules, are rules that say if you wait too long to enforce your rights, even if it's less than the statute of limitations, or if you do things that might indicate that you acquiesced or agreed with the showing, you might erode your rights to some extent. So the point of when I hear about something that's been going on for 10 years, the first discussion I'd want to have with a client is to really analyze the facts and really look at whether that 10 years is so long that the rights may have eroded or may indeed even have disappeared. That being said, there are lots of, like everything in the law, they try to strike a balance. The law tries to be fair. If there are reasons that it's been 10 years, there are extenuating circumstances, it's something worth looking at rather than just giving up.
If you're talking about a celebrity appearing in some footage and you're using that footage in a documentary or a film or something of that nature, I mean, most right of publicity statutes have an exception for, they have certain exceptions for art, for criticism, for filmmaking. And again, it really goes back to the specific circumstances that you're talking about in order to come up with a more informed
About
choice.
time of discovery. If it's out for 10 years and it's only discovered 1 year before.
That's one of the things that could be relevant. There could be a tolling, as they call it, of the statute. There's always a fact question of, did you know or did you not know? If it's, her example, it had been out there. So,
Oh, just that it's also, there's two different things here. We're trying to control what happens to an image. I mean, forget it. We now live in a world where if you make or are involved in any creative work that can be transmitted electronically, you have to just give up you have to accept the fact that your work will not, you have no control in the way that we're used to. The work cannot retain its integrity. People will do what they're going to do with it. If there's some naked picture of you that you put up on MySpace or something, it could be out there forever. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in politics, because we're going to start to see in our lifetime, we're going to start to see things like there's going to be the person who's running for senator who actually had the unflattering stuff he posted on his MySpace page right now when he's a kid that has all been preserved and archived, and believe me, every single thing you put up on your Facebook or MySpace page, whether you delete it or not, it is all being kept somewhere.
So a lot of ideas have been talked about in copyright circles about, how do we get the law both to and continue to incentivize artists to create, but at the same time recognize this new art form and to make it's not a force field. It's a defense. So if someone sues you, you can use fair use as a defense. It's still going to be very expensive for you to defend yourself. I mean, one idea is, we should make fair use in certain categories a presumption. And so then we're going to put the burden on the plaintiff to prove that it's not a fair use rather than on the defendant. Other ideas have been, we should deregulate amateur culture so that the kid in his bedroom who's making videos, copyright law shouldn't touch him at all.